Hello, my friends. Today's summary tells the story of one of the most thrilling detective cases, featuring a brilliant investigator who solves the mystery of a puzzling crime. So, who killed the millionaire? Let's find out together. The movie begins with Officer Paul presenting a plan to occupy Egypt to the British Army commander. The commander agrees to the plan because Paul is a very smart officer who has fought in many wars. His idea actually succeeds, and the British Army manages to occupy Egypt and reaches the Egyptian border bridge. But suddenly, the commander steps on a landmine, and the entire bridge explodes along with the British Army. After that, William is taken to the hospital, and his fiancée comes to check on him. But he refuses to see her and tells her he didn't want her to see him like that. He asks her to stay away from him. She gets emotional and hesitates because his face has been disfigured, but she tells him she's not going to leave him no matter what. She asks him to grow a mustache to cover the scars on his face. Years pass, and Paul grows older. He becomes the most famous and brilliant crime investigator in England. One day, Detective Paul goes to a well-known restaurant to enjoy his time. Suddenly, music starts playing, and everyone in the restaurant begins to dance. We then see a woman named Jacqueline dancing with her fiancé Simon. At that moment, another woman named Linnet shows up. She's the richest woman in England. She greets her friend Jacqueline and asks her to help Simon get a job since he's unemployed. Later, Simon meets Linnet, and she quickly falls for him. She tells him he'll work with her as a real estate agent. Jacqueline thanks her a lot for helping Simon and asks him to dance with Linnet to show his appreciation. It's clear there's mutual attraction between the two. 3 months later, Detective Paul is sitting in front of the Sphinx but gets annoyed when he sees someone flying a kite over the pyramids. He walks over to speak with him and realizes it's his close friend, Book. Paul asks Book what he's doing in Egypt, and Book tells him he's on a short break and decided to disconnect and spend his vacation far from detective work. Book invites Paul to a wedding for one of his relatives that will take place in Aswan. He insists Paul attend the wedding since he's his closest friend. Paul agrees and goes with him to meet Book's mother, who is painting the pyramids. Book is happy to see her drawing him while he flies his kite. A week later, they arrive at a hotel in Aswan. The hotel staff are all busy preparing for a major wedding. Louise, the bride's personal maid, goes to get her necklace and is stunned by its beauty. It's made of diamonds and worth $2 million. Soon after, Book gathers everyone at the hotel and introduces the bride and groom. The big surprise: the bride and groom are none other than Linnet and Simon, Jacqueline's former fiancé. Linnet goes around greeting all the guests and boasts to Detective Paul, since he's the most famous investigator in Europe. Then she goes to greet her cousin Andrew and tells Simon that Andrew is her lawyer and the one in charge of all her financial matters. The music starts, and Book chats with Detective Paul, introducing him to all the guests at the wedding. He tells him the man Linnet was hugging is Dr. Windlesham, her ex-fiancé. She broke off the engagement because she didn't love him, even though he was deeply in love with her and still attached to her. That woman over there is her stepmother, who's basically like a mother to her and now controls all the inheritance after Linnet's father passed away. The other woman is her nanny and her stepmother's assistant, and she's clearly after Linnet's wealth too. They also meet Rosalie, Linnet's friend, who is the daughter of the famous singer Salome, who is performing at the wedding. While they're celebrating, Jacqueline suddenly shows up, Simon's ex-fiancée, trying to ruin the wedding. Linnet sees her, her expression changes, and she storms out of the party. Detective Paul notices everything, and as a sharp investigator, he quickly puts things together. He figures out that Linnet stole Simon from her friend Jacqueline, and now Jacqueline wants revenge for what Linnet did to her. Jacqueline tells Simon she'll never leave him no matter what. The next day, Linnet is enjoying her honeymoon with Simon in Aswan when they bump into Detective Paul. They talk to him, and Simon asks Paul to keep an eye on Jacqueline because she's following them everywhere, and they're afraid she might try to kill one of them. Paul tells them he doesn't see any direct threat from her, and doesn't think it's necessary to keep watch. But Linnet cuts in and tells him Jacqueline might do anything to get Simon back. After a while, Detective Paul goes to Jacqueline and tries to negotiate with her, asking her to stay away from Linnet. But she tells him that she loves Simon and that if she stays away from him, she'll kill herself. However, before she does that, she wants to take revenge on Linnet for stealing the only man she ever loved. Paul starts to suspect that Jacqueline is planning to kill Linnet, and he becomes certain of it when he sees her pulling a .22 caliber pistol from her bag. She tells him she's ready to take her revenge at any moment. So Paul goes to Simon and Linnet and urges them to leave Egypt and return to their country, since Jacqueline clearly isn't going to leave them alone. After that, he leaves. The next day, Simon gathers all of Linnet's relatives and tells them he's decided to continue their honeymoon in Aswan and enjoy the rest of their time there. Later, Linnet takes everyone aboard her boat and says she'll take them to visit the Karnak temple. Shortly after, she goes to Detective Paul's room and thanks him for agreeing to help monitor Jacqueline. She also tells him she wants him to keep an eye on all her relatives on board, as she doesn't trust them. They're all greedy for her money. The following day, Linnet is sitting with her husband Simon when her cousin Andrew interrupts and asks her to sign some papers for the ownership of a new piece of land. She says she wants to read the documents before signing, but Andrew takes them back and apologizes for interrupting her conversation with Simon before walking away. Paul is sitting nearby, watching everything, and realizes that her cousin was trying to trick her into signing papers so he could steal her fortune. That night, Linnet's family starts dancing and enjoying themselves. Detective Paul approaches the singer, Salome, and tells her he admires her beautiful voice. She thanks him for the compliment and walks away. Then Book, Paul's friend, asks if he has a crush on Salome. Paul replies that he lost the woman he loved a long time ago, and ever since, he hasn't thought about anyone else. Paul changes the subject and tells Book that he knows his secret. He's in love with Rosalie, Linnet's friend. Book is surprised by how sharp Paul is and admits it's true, but says he can't tell anyone because his mother won't approve of him marrying someone of his own choice. The next day, they arrive at the Abu Simbel temple and are amazed by its magnificence. As they enter, the group begins to split up. The singer Salome approaches Paul and asks if he's married. He tells her no, he was married once, but his wife passed away. Meanwhile, Simon and Linnet are standing by a statue of Ramses II, near the edge of the temple, enjoying a romantic moment. Suddenly, a massive rock falls near them. Simon tries to protect Linnet, and luckily, neither of them is harmed. Paul tells them the incident was no accident. Someone is trying to kill them. They decide to leave the temple. Linnet is clearly upset by what happened. After a while, they return to the boat. Linnet vents to her husband, saying that Jacqueline is the one who tried to kill them at the temple, and that she doesn't want to see her anywhere near them. Her presence is dangerous. That night, Linnet and her husband sit down for dinner, while Jacqueline watches them from a distance. Paul is also observing everything. Linnet later approaches Paul and tells him she's decided to cancel the rest of their honeymoon and return home, because Jacqueline's presence is causing too much trouble. Jacqueline overhears what Linnet says, gets upset, and walks away. Simon then offers Paul a glass of champagne before leaving. He starts to feel dizzy since it's his first time drinking champagne. On his way, he runs into Jacqueline and asks her to think about her life and move on from Simon. He's married now. Jacqueline tells him she simply can't live without Simon. Paul is moved by her words and tells her he understands. He lost the love of his life in an accident, and ever since, he hasn't been able to think about or love anyone else. He says her death made him stronger and turned him into the most famous detective in Europe. He apologizes to Jacqueline and tells her he's going to his room to sleep. At the same time, Linnet is sitting with her husband and tells him it's getting late, and she needs to go back to her room to take a sleeping pill. Jacqueline smiles and says, "You'd better get some good sleep, because soon you won't be able to sleep at all after what I'm going to do to you." Linnet is shocked by her words. She apologizes to Jacqueline for stealing Simon and asks her to forget the past and be friends again. Then she walks away. Simon gets angry at Jacqueline and tells her he hates her for ruining their honeymoon. Rosalie asks him not to hurt her feelings with such words. But Jacqueline loses control. She pulls out her gun and shoots Simon in the leg. Jacqueline screams when she sees him in pain and immediately regrets what she did, realizing she acted impulsively. She tries to shoot herself, but Rosalie catches her at the last second, knocks the gun out of her hand, and takes her to the nanny's room to calm her down. At that moment, Book goes to Dr. Windlesham's room and asks him to come with him to treat Simon. Meanwhile, Detective Poirot is still asleep, completely unaware of what's happening due to the champagne he drank. The next morning, Louise, Linnet's personal maid, goes to her room to bring her breakfast. Poirot hears Louise screaming, so he rushes over to see what's going on, only to find that Linnet has been shot in the head while she was sleeping. Dr. Windlesham arrives and tells Poirot that Linnet was killed at around 6 a.m., and it looks like she was shot with a .22 caliber gun. Poirot immediately suspects that Jacqueline is the one who killed her. He heads to Jacqueline's room to interrogate her but finds her asleep. The nanny tells him that there's no way Jacqueline could have killed Linnet because she had taken a sedative and had been asleep the entire night after shooting Simon. Poirot then meets with Rosalie and Book to ask them about what happened the previous night while he was asleep. Rosalie tells him something strange occurred. After she took Jacqueline back to her room, she came back to retrieve Jacqueline's gun, but it was missing. Poirot tells them he's officially launching an investigation, and the killer must be someone on the boat. He says he'll interrogate everyone on board without exception and that Book will assist him. He then heads to Linnet's room, where he finds her husband Simon emotionally shattered by what's happened. Simon insists that Jacqueline is the one who killed his wife. But Poirot tells him that Jacqueline couldn't have done it, she was asleep at the time of the murder. Simon breaks down and pleads with Poirot to solve the case and catch the killer as soon as possible. He also mentions that whoever did this was likely after Linnet's money, and that the most valuable thing she owned was her diamond necklace. Poirot checks for the necklace but finds it missing. This makes him suspect Louise, the maid, so he brings her in for questioning. Louise denies everything and says she loved Linnet like a sister and would never hurt her. After questioning her, Poirot reads her personality and concludes that she's not the killer. He then orders the crew to search every room on the boat for any potential evidence. Later, Poirot heads to the ship's morgue and questions Dr. Windlesham, Linnet's former fiancée before she married Simon. The doctor tells him he had no reason to kill Linnet. Unlike others, he truly loved her and wasn't interested in her wealth since his father is already a wealthy man. But Poirot accuses him anyway, suggesting he may have lost control seeing his former love marry someone else, and killed her so he wouldn't have to watch her with another man. The doctor becomes emotional and insists he still loves her. He says that if he were to kill anyone, it would have been Simon, not Linnet. Poirot believes him and clears him as a suspect. Next, Poirot turns to Andrew, Linnet's cousin and her lawyer, who's also suspected of being after her fortune. Poirot accuses him of attempting to get Linnet to sign over property rights to him. When he realized she was going to read the papers, he quickly took them back to prevent her from discovering the scheme. Andrew defends himself, saying he had no interest in her death because if she died, her fortune would be divided between her stepmother and her husband, Simon. Then he pulls out his pistol and says that if he had wanted to kill her, he would have done it long ago using his own gun. Poirot notices that Andrew's gun is a .45 caliber, which doesn't match the murder weapon, so he's ruled out as a suspect. Linnet was killed with a .22 caliber gun. Poirot then questions Linnet's stepmother and her old nanny. They say it's impossible they would have hurt Linnet. After all, the nanny raised her since childhood. And when her stepmother married Linnet's father, he was poor, while Linnet was the daughter of the richest man in England. So she had nothing to gain from killing her, since she already had plenty of money. Suddenly, Poirot hears a crew member shouting that something's been found in the water. When Poirot gets there, they discover the murder weapon, the .22 caliber gun that killed Linnet, along with a cloth that the killer used to silence the shot. Poirot then heads to Salami's room, the famous singer, and begins questioning her, asking about her relationship with Linnet. She tries to avoid the question and tells him she's impressed by his intelligence. Poirot interrupts her, saying he doesn't suspect her, but he still needs to question everyone on the boat. Then Rosalie, Salami's daughter, steps in and tells Poirot that Linnet was both lovable and unlikable at the same time. She was selfish and wanted to have everything for herself. Just then, Book's mother shows up and says she found Linnet's missing necklace in one of her drawers. Poirot concludes that the person who stole the necklace is not the same person who killed Linnet, meaning the thief and the murderer are two different people. Poirot goes out to talk to Rosalie and continue his questioning, when suddenly he spots a body floating in the water. They pull the body out and discover it's Louise, the maid. She's found with a large amount of money on her. Poirot concludes that Louise knew who the killer was and had blackmailed them, asking for money in exchange for her silence. But the killer, afraid she'd crack under pressure and confess everything, decided to kill her and get rid of her for good. Dr. Windlesham tries to solve the murder and explains that Louise was killed with a small scalpel. Since only doctors typically use such tools, everyone begins to suspect Dr. Windlesham. Andrew accuses him of killing Louise, which angers the doctor and leads to a fight between them. Meanwhile, Detective Poirot ignores the argument and focuses on putting the pieces together. Jacqueline then approaches Poirot and pleads with him to find the killer quickly, because if they return to shore without solving the crime, the Egyptian police will arrest them all. Poirot says there's one person he hasn't questioned yet. He goes with Simon to speak with Book, his assistant, who had been helping him with the investigation. Poirot asks him why he didn't go to Linnet's room to tell her that her husband had been shot. Book gets nervous and says he heard her say she was going to take a sleeping pill, so he didn't want to disturb her. Poirot accuses Book of lying, saying that if he's hiding the truth, then he must be keeping a big secret. That secret, Poirot claims, is that Book did go into Linnet's room to tell her Simon had been shot, but instead found her already murdered. And rather than reporting the crime, he noticed her valuable necklace, got greedy, and stole it so he could marry his love, Rosalie. Later, when he realized Poirot was searching the rooms, he tried to return the necklace, but by coincidence, saw the killer murdering Louise. So, he hid the necklace in his mother's room, thinking no one would suspect her. That meant Book knew who the killer was. Book then confesses that Poirot is right, and says he's willing to tell everything, but wants Poirot to understand, when someone's in love, they'll do anything for the person they love. Suddenly, a gunshot hits Book in the neck, and he dies before revealing the killer's identity. Poirot sees the shooter running away, chases him, but sadly fails to catch him. Book's mother is devastated when she learns her son has died. Later, Poirot goes to the morgue, where Rosalie arrives completely distraught and begs him to catch the killer no matter what. It's clear that Poirot is heartbroken over his friend's death. That night, Poirot gathers everyone on the boat and tells them that Book always believed in him because he was the most famous detective in Europe, and he won't let his friend down. Poirot fires a warning shot and tells the crew to lock the doors so no one can escape. He's about to reveal who the murderer is. Poirot says Book discovered the killer when he said, "Someone in love will do anything for the one they love." From that, Poirot figured out that the killer was Simon, Linnet's husband. He killed her to inherit her fortune and reunite with his ex-fiancée Jacqueline, who was his partner in all these crimes. Poirot explains everything he deduced. Simon had drugged Poirot's champagne to make sure he'd be asleep that night. Then he and Jacqueline staged a fake fight. When Jacqueline fired a shot at Simon, it was a blank. Simon used red nail polish on a handkerchief to fake a gunshot wound. When Rosalie escorted Jacqueline to her room, Simon took her gun, rushed to Linnet's room, shot her dead, and returned to his spot to shoot himself in the leg to make it seem like he couldn't possibly have committed the murder. That way, no one would suspect him. Simon loses his temper and insists he didn't kill anyone. He challenges Poirot. If his story is true, how could he have killed Louise and Book too? Poirot replies that Jacqueline, his partner in crime, was the one who killed them. She had masterminded the plan from the start. The proof? Simon had given her the signal to kill Book while they were being interrogated. Jacqueline is stunned by Poirot's deduction and breaks down, admitting she did it all because she loved Simon. He was in serious financial trouble and needed money, so he married Linnet, faked hating Jacqueline to distance himself, and once he killed Linnet and inherited her wealth, they planned to escape together. Simon pulls a gun and points it at Poirot, telling Jacqueline they need to run. But she tells him Poirot has a gun too, and they'll get caught. Then she takes the gun from Simon and points it at Poirot. Simon tells her he loves her and can't live without her. She's touched, kisses him, and then fires a shot that passes through both of them, killing them instantly. The next day, the boat reaches the shore. The crew unloads all the bodies, and Poirot tells Linnet's family members not to speak of the murders when they return to England so that the family name won't be disgraced. And with that, Detective Hercule Poirot successfully solves one of the most complex and brilliant murder cases in history. If you like the movie, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts.